Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Johnson, Editor-in-Chief of the Walrus, and I'm so excited to be giving my first Walrus talk. Over the years, I've seen some big presences on these stages, some household names, some youth I was just discovering for the first time. I learned something from all of them, and thank you for honoring me with your presence tonight. My topic is the future of journalism. It's a subject I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of different kinds of people about over the last few years. And to be honest, I knew I couldn't just come up here again and talk about how the media is dying. If you're here, you probably already know what some of the problems are. The first draft of my speech, I put in all the facts and figures about job losses and media outlets closing, and it was just so depressing, I had to tear it up. Instead, I'd like to talk about the challenges we face against the backdrop of other larger trends, because this is really the story about us and how society is changing. The first one is the polarization of knowledge. We've talked a lot in the last few years about political polarization and how the left and the right supposedly just can't talk to each other anymore. I don't think we're talking enough about the difference in the quality of the information we're sharing and receiving. As more media outlets die and areas across Canada become news deserts, as they're called now, there are two types of citizen emerging: those with access to high-quality, fact-based journalism, like the kind you can read in the Walrus, and those without that. You have people who pay for the New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, The Globe, The Toronto Star, and of course the Walrus. But there's a huge category of journalism that might have some truth or value, but you can't trust it because it lacks transparency. Who reported it? How did they report it? Are they telling you that? I worry more about this category of poorly reported, or what we call unethical news at the Walrus, than I do about fake news. Because fake news I find relatively easy to spot. It's too fun. Poorly reported news is invisible, it's everywhere, and it's become normal. At worst, you have those who acquire sketchy knowledge on YouTube or in dark and sometimes secret corners of the internet. Like those recent protesters in Ottawa, some of whom thought COVID-19 vaccines are a conspiracy arising out of the World Economic Forum. I think, in truth, it's hard to find real reporting about what those people think. A factor in this change is the news deserts. Thousands and thousands of professional journalism jobs have been cut in the last decade in Canada, and local news has been the hardest hit. Which leads me to my second point. Our idea of the media is expanding so fast, and it's almost impossible to define it anymore. As journalists, we now think about how a single story is going to perform on 18 different platforms or apps, or just those platforms that are relevant to our own audiences. This talk could eventually end up as a TikTok, and it'll be going like that. My partner's young child can think of no better career, even though both his parents were trained in journalism, than becoming a YouTuber. If you don't know yet, YouTube is a platform that is a portal for your entertainment and your news and talking to your friends all at the same time. Why would you need the media? Gone are the days when the news had to be delivered by a specific kind of person, maybe a person in a suit, from a specific channel, at a specific time and place, like the 6 o'clock news. A journalist is two people with a newsletter, a New York Times reporter, or some guy on Twitter. Not every guy on Twitter. Sometimes the guy is all of those people. He's also got a podcast, you should check it out. I was thinking about Marshall McLuhan's quote that the media is the message, medium is the message. I'm not even sure that's the right statement for this era anymore. One thing all reliable media outlets have in common, though, is that it takes time and money to produce the good kind of journalism. Which brings me to my last point. I really don't want to be the person that just goes around saying this, but I'm going to be that person. We all need to get used to paying much more for content. Most of us pay shockingly little. A recent global study by the Reuters Institute in Oxford found that only 13% of Canadians pay for online news. More than a quarter of those paying subscribers support international publications, so not Canadian ones. I have read 17 free Guardian articles this month, and I know that because the Guardian is so good at counting them for me and asking for money. Every now and then I do flip them $5, but I can assure you as an editor that is not okay. Why do we think journalism should be free? Is it because it's so essential that, like hydro or heating, we expect that someone else will be taking care of it? The federal government recently announced Bill C-18, which is new legislation. It proposes to make tech platforms, like Meta and Google, compensate media outlets when people share the content we create. News, as you probably know, is a major driver of social media. These changes will help to offset some of the ad revenue that's been lost by the rise of the platforms. I can't lie, it sounds pretty good to me. But even if it kicked in tomorrow, I know it would cover only a fraction of the cost of what it costs to make journalism. Government intervention alone is not going to keep a healthy media industry alive. We all need to get used to paying more for content. It's the only way to keep our favorite outlets alive and maybe ensure that our not-so-favorite outlets are around for those who rely on them. Media may be a mostly private industry in this country, a handful of businesses trying to compete. But in fact, that's not true. The CBC is the country's biggest media outlet. If my colleagues see me say that, they'll fact-check me. But fact-based journalism as a whole, like our courts, libraries, government, nurses and teachers, all these same roles we've come to appreciate in the pandemic even more than usual, is what helps keep our society going. It means it's never been more important to think about what we need media for. Not everyone may want to read the Globe or follow the CBC. Some of my own family members believe the Walrus's articles are simply too long. But that doesn't mean they should have access to poorer quality information. They should not be sent believing what sent those truckers to Ottawa. I believe some of this gap in understanding is the media's own failure to grasp what people value about us. When a lot of us talk about the value of journalism, we try to use big words. We talk about democracy or disinformation. Almost every media outlet has a democracy campaign. Supporting journalism has become a moral argument. We've branded what used to be essential as a luxury product, and I fear, a class signifier. That's not what drives me to reach for my phone first thing in the morning, which is, of course, Wordle. But I look up the COVID-19 numbers in my area. What's the rise in inflation doing to real estate? Top 10 tips for working remotely. Are we really going to be working from home in a pandemic forever? These are not the questions of democracy, but they are the questions of people's lives. Democracy is what happens when everyone's life is working. The best way to ensure democracy's survival is to make sure everyone has equal access to information. We can't do that without the media, however and wherever you find it. Thank you.